My name's Matt Coyle, and I struggled with addiction of all sorts for 17 years of my life, and I'm going on almost 5 years clean now. So, 5 years old, dad went to prison. Mom was also addicted to drugs. Fortunately, my mom's brother adopted me, so I was kept in the family and moved out of Wichita, Kansas into a small town in Kansas where kind of everybody knew everybody. And my grandparents, who were God-fearing, loving people, they lived about a mile away, and so I got to spend lots of time with Grandma and Grandpa growing up. My mother was in contact with me, but it was never honest. A lot of disappointed birthdays, so on and so forth. And I think subconsciously in my mind, I was naturally drawn in that direction because something had to be just amazing about this stuff if my mom chose it over me. I would have been about 13. The first time that, it was so easily accessed in that area, just a little town, nothing to do. This was back before they started locking Sudafed behind the counter, right? And so it was everywhere. And my best friend at the time would steal it from his parents, and we'd stay up playing video games, and it grabbed us both at a really young age. Fortunately, when I was 16, it wasn't a suicide attempt, but I was intoxicated and I was in an argument. I ended up going to the crisis center overnight, and my grandma at that point said, "We're not helping him." And so that actually did me a lot of good because it removed me from my surroundings that I had spent all those years building, all these problems that became my life. And it moved me across the state where I graduated high school. I'm not gonna say I graduated with honors, but I graduated, which my grandfather was just thrilled by that alone because he was sure I was dropping out. When I was, I think 22 was the first time I ever went to an inpatient rehab, knowing I had a drug problem. I didn't have an alcohol problem, I had a drug problem. You can probably see where this is going. And so I get out of rehab, I get a place of my own, and what a better way to break in your new place than to go get some alcohol. And it just took me right back into that same pattern. Once again, it was one of those things where I wanted my life to get better. I didn't want to change anything. Something interesting about this relapse recovery process is having God instilled in me from a child. Like, even when I didn't want to live the way I knew I was supposed to, when life flipped upside down, I always knew where to turn. And it was always real short-lived, but it was like I would cry out to him, and even though nothing's hidden from him, he knew I was gonna do it again, but he came to my rescue many times. Goodness. So it would have been 2019 when I was kicked out of the Unity house. I actually had a warrant. And for the first time in my whole life, there was no one to call. And that was like the aha moment for me. I'm just like, God, what do I do? And that night, that early morning, I threw away what I had left of drugs. And I went to Country Oaks, where I met Kirk Thompson, who to this day is my best friend. And I found out from him that, hey, I'm going to 180. And and kind of got to talking about it and what it is, and I'm just like, sounds like exactly what I need, and filled out the application, and it was the start of a brand new life. I told myself if I just get rid of the drugs, get rid of the alcohol, my life will get better. And that didn't ring true. I got a good job and I had a decent car, and externally things were better. But there was still a void. There was something empty in here, which initially I tried filling it with all kinds of things, with girlfriends, with NA meetings, AA meetings. I chaired the things, and nothing satisfied. And so I checked that box before I ever got to 180. Because if I would have showed up to 180 chasing after sobriety instead of seeking God, I don't think it would have had the same effect. And the way this program was set up is it serves as kind of an incubator, right? So all these things I've surrounded myself with that are horrible for me were blocked out, right? And then the entire focus of 180 is like, you wake up in the morning, you go to Bible study. And you go to work, you come home, get a little downtime, you go to Bible study, right? And then you get a little downtime, and everything that you do is church. Everything is gospel-centered, right? Which is what I was after. I got to know him, right? Not the idea of him, not the principles of Christianity and the language that makes you sound like a Christian, right? I got to know him. And that's really like my prayer for other guys that are coming out of that lifestyle. Because knowing God, knowing Christ, knowing that all those things, it's no secret that when you live in addiction, you do things that you're not proud of, right? And God knows about every one of those things. And he still loves you. And knowing that I'm not defined by these things, and knowing what Scripture tells me that he says about me, it was life-changing. You're not defined as an addict. You're a child of God. You have worth. Everything derives its worth according to its relationship to God. And he calls me his son, his child. It's amazing. Well, I ended up at Rock Church very welcoming, from people who never met me before, you felt at home. And so I just continued going. And later on, my pastor, Josiah, noticed a passion that I had. And he says, hey, they had this house given to the church. Would you want to start a men's home for addicts? I know what it takes to live peacefully with a bunch of other guys, right? And there's patience, there's personal space, there's understanding, there's just all around courtesy and respect. There's these elements to living in a larger group of people like that are necessary to make sure everybody's somewhat happy at the end of the day. No matter how colorful it is, I'm a firm believer that God won't waste your past. I always kind of have in my own mind how much grace I was shown, because there was a lot. I didn't get it the first try. When you are in your addiction, you are shackled to it, right? You don't really make decisions separate from that addiction. Everything kind of revolves around that addiction, right? It has taken complete control. And so with that not being like this extra weight, for one, like frees up all kinds of areas of your life. And you get to actually be present where you're at and not looking forward to the next time I have enough money to buy drugs. And then of course Christ, he is the source of our freedom. Anytime you're going through a storm, it's gonna break. There's sunshine on the backside of that. And those are, that's just the promise of Christ, is that, it gets better.